The morning light filtered through the worn curtains of the small brick house on Chicago's South Side, casting soft shadows across the bedroom where Aaliyah Hayes stood before her closet. In her hands, she held a garment bag containing the most expensive piece of clothing she'd ever owned, a powder blue silk dress with delicate beading along the neckline. It had cost $400 more than she'd ever spent on herself in 40 years. "You look beautiful already, honey." Malik's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar as Sunday morning coffee. Aaliyah turned to see her husband of 42 years leaning against the doorframe, his own suit a charcoal gray number that had set them back another $350 hanging from his finger. At 65, Malik still had the same gentle eyes that had caught her attention at a church social in 1983, though his hair had gone completely silver now. "I was just thinking," Aaliyah said softly, running her fingers over the silk. "Do you remember when we opened Soul and Spice?" Malik smiled, walking over to stand beside his wife. "November 3rd, 1985. How could I forget you were wearing that yellow dress with the flowers on it? And Jasmine was 3 years old, running around the empty dining room like it was a playground. She fell and scraped her knee on the tile." Malik continued, the memory clearly painted across his face. "You patched her up with a Band-Aid from the first aid kit we'd just bought, and she stopped crying when I promised her ice cream from Mr. Martinez's shop next door." Aaliyah's eyes grew misty. "I held her in that kitchen, our kitchen, and I promised myself that she'd never have to work as hard as we did, that she'd have choices we never had." "And she did, didn't she?" Malik wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Full scholarship to Northwestern. Good job at that marketing firm. And now she's getting married. The wedding. Their daughter's wedding. Today." Aaliyah looked around their modest bedroom, the same furniture they'd bought secondhand 20 years ago. The walls they'd painted themselves last spring, the framed photographs chronicling a lifetime of love and struggle. There was Jasmine at 5, gap-toothed and grinning in front of the restaurant. Jasmine at 12 in her school uniform that Aaliyah had ironed every single morning. Jasmine at 18 in her graduation cap and gown, the first in their family to finish high school, let alone go to college. And Jasmine at 22, diploma in hand from Northwestern University, her eyes bright with possibility. 40 years, Aaliyah whispered. "We spent 40 years building a life for her." Malik pressed a kiss to his wife's temple. "And today we get to see her start building her own." If only they had known what the day would actually bring. The flashback came unbidden, as it often did when Aaliyah stood in that familiar space between past and present. She could see herself as she'd been 23 years old, with a baby on her hip and dreams bigger than their tiny apartment could hold. Malik had been 25, working double shifts at the meatpacking plant while going to culinary school at night. They'd scrimped and saved every dollar. Aaliyah had taken in sewing hemming pants and letting out dresses for neighbors. She'd clipped coupons, religiously made meals from whatever was on sale, watered down the milk to make it last longer. And finally, after 2 years of living on prayers and determination, they'd had enough for a down payment on the tiny restaurant space. Soul and Spice Diner. 20 tables, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, and a dream as big as Lake Michigan. Aaliyah remembered holding 3-year-old Jasmine's hand as they'd stood in front of that space for the first time with the keys in Malik's hand. The little girl had looked up at her mother with those wide brown eyes and asked, "Mama, is this ours?" "Yes, baby," Aaliyah had whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This is ours." What she hadn't told her daughter was that ours meant 16-hour days. It meant Malik in the kitchen from 4 a.m. until midnight, perfecting his grandmother's fried chicken recipe, his mother's collard greens, his own special cornbread that would eventually become their signature dish. It meant Aaliyah running between the dining room and the kitchen, taking orders, serving food, washing dishes, mopping floors, and somehow managing to help Jasmine with her homework at a corner booth between dinner rush and closing time. It meant missed dance recitals because they couldn't afford to close the restaurant. It meant Christmases with modest gifts because every extra dollar went back into the business. It meant wearing the same clothes year after year, patching and mending until there was nothing left to patch. But it also meant something else. It meant pride. It meant legacy. It meant that when Jasmine asked for school supplies, they could afford them. When she needed a winter coat, they could buy it. When she dreamed of college, they could tell her, "Yes, baby, you can do anything." The memory shifted, growing darker. Jasmine at 10 coming home from school with tears streaking her face. "What happened, sweetheart?" Aaliyah had asked, pulling her daughter close. "Sarah Jenkins said, she said you and Daddy are just cooks. She said her parents are doctors, and that makes them better than you." Aaliyah's heart had cracked that day. Not for herself, she'd heard worse over the years, but for her daughter. She'd held Jasmine tight and whispered, "Baby being a cook means we feed people. We make them happy. We bring families together. That's not just something. That's everything." But she'd seen it in her daughter's eyes, even then, the tiny seed of shame beginning to take root. The first meeting with Trevor's family had taken place 3 months ago at an upscale restaurant in the Gold Coast neighborhood, the kind of place where Aaliyah and Malik had never eaten, as customers only dreamed of running something half as elegant. Jasmine had been nervous, Aaliyah remembered. Her daughter had fussed with her hair all morning, changed her outfit 3 times, and barely touched her breakfast. "It's just dinner, honey," Aaliyah had reassured her. "We're all going to love each other." But from the moment they'd walked into that restaurant, Aaliyah had felt the chill. Patricia Whitmore sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court. At 60, she was impeccably dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Aaliyah's entire wardrobe. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob, her manicured nails gleamed, and her smile never quite reached her eyes. "You must be Jasmine's parents," Patricia had said, her tone pleasant but somehow distant. "I'm Patricia Whitmore, and this is my son, Trevor." Trevor had been warmer, shaking Malik's hand firmly and kissing Aaliyah's cheek. At 32, he was handsome in an effortless way, tall, well-built, with warm brown skin and an easy smile. He worked as an attorney, Jasmine had told them proudly, at a prestigious firm downtown. "It's wonderful to finally meet you," Trevor had said, and Aaliyah had wanted to believe the sincerity in his voice. "Jasmine talks about you all the time." But does she tell you the truth? Aaliyah had wondered even then, catching the warning glance her daughter shot her way. The dinner conversation had been stilted, full of polite inquiries about the weather and compliments about the food. When Patricia asked about their business ventures, Jasmine had quickly interjected. "Mom and Dad have been entrepreneurs for 40 years. She'd said, her voice bright but strained. "They own property in the South Side." It wasn't technically a lie. They did own the building where Soul and Spice was located, having finally paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. But it was a lie of omission, and Aaliyah had felt the weight of what wasn't being said settling on her chest like a stone. Patricia had seemed satisfied with this vague answer, moving on to discuss the wedding plans. But Aaliyah had noticed the way her daughter avoided specifics, the way she steered the conversation away from any mention of the restaurant, the way she introduced them as Aaliyah and Malik, rather than Mom and Dad. Later that night, after they'd returned home, Jasmine had pulled her mother aside. "Mom," she'd said, her voice low and urgent, "please don't talk too much about the restaurant, okay? Trevor's family is they're very particular about appearances. I just want everything to be perfect." Aaliyah had felt something twist in her chest. "Baby, are you ashamed of what we do?" "No," Jasmine had said too quickly. "No, of course not. I want them to see me as someone sophisticated, someone who belongs in their world. Does that make sense?" It made sense. God help her, it made terrible, heartbreaking sense. But Aaliyah had swallowed her hurt and nodded. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever makes you happy." The venue visit had come next, and it had nearly stopped Aaliyah's heart. Thornfield Manor sat on 20 acres of manicured grounds 40 minutes outside Chicago. It was a stone mansion that looked like something from a movie, with ivy-covered walls, soaring windows, and gardens that could have been featured in magazines. "This is where I want to get married," Jasmine had announced, her eyes shining with a joy Aaliyah hadn't seen in years. "Isn't it perfect? Perfect." Yes, and perfectly impossible. The estate coordinator, a crisp woman named Victoria, had walked them through the property, pointing out the grand ballroom, the garden pavilion, the bridal suite. With each step, Aaliyah had felt the number growing in her mind, adding up all the zeros she knew they couldn't afford. "And the total cost for a wedding of 150 guests. Malik had finally asked, his voice steady, despite the worry Aaliyah could see in his eyes. "For the full package, venue, catering, florals, and basic coordination, we're looking at $120,000, Victoria had said as casually as if she were discussing the weather. Aaliyah's knees had gone weak. That was more than they'd made in the last 3 years combined. That was the entire balance of their savings account, their emergency fund, their retirement nest egg. That was everything they had left after putting Jasmine through college. "Mom, Dad," Jasmine's voice had been small, hopeful, heartbreaking. "I know it's a lot, but I've dreamed about this. Trevor's family will be expecting something elegant." And there it was again, that unspoken expectation, that pressure to be something they weren't. Aaliyah had looked at her husband, and in his eyes she'd seen 40 years of love and sacrifice reflected back at her. They'd always given Jasmine everything they could. How could they stop now? "We'll make it work," Aaliyah had heard herself say, even as her heart cracked a little more. But there was more. Always more. "Actually," Jasmine had said, pulling Aaliyah aside as Malik discussed deposit details with Victoria, "there's something else. The venue coordinator, Rachel Thompson, I found out she went to school with you, Mom." Aaliyah had brightened. Rachel Thompson? Oh my goodness, I haven't seen her in 40 years. She was my best friend in high school. I had no idea she owned this place." "Yeah, well," Jasmine had shifted uncomfortably. "I kind of already talked to her. She's giving us a discount because of your connection. But Mom, please, can we not make a big deal about you two being old friends? I told Trevor's family that we have a business relationship with the venue owners, that it's a professional arrangement." "Why would you, please, Mom?" Jasmine's eyes had been pleading desperate. "I just want everything to seem official, professional, not like we're getting handouts or charity." Aaliyah had felt something in her chest crack a little wider. "Is that what you think? That your father and I are charity cases?" "No, I want Trevor's family to see that I come from people who are successful. Is that so wrong?" It wasn't wrong. That was the tragedy of it. It wasn't wrong to want to be seen, to want to be valued, to want to belong. But it was breaking Aaliyah's heart all the same. 6 weeks before the wedding, Aaliyah had stopped by Jasmine's new apartment in Lincoln Park, a sleek high-rise that Trevor's family had helped them secure. She'd brought her daughter's favorite meal, her grandmother's mac and cheese made from scratch the way she'd been making it for 40 years. She'd found Jasmine in the lobby, standing with Patricia Whitmore, both women dressed in expensive workout clothes, laughing over coffee from the trendy cafe next door. "Jasmine," Aaliyah had called out, her face brightening at the sight of her daughter. But Jasmine's smile had faltered. Just for a second, but Aaliyah had seen it. "Oh, Mom, hi." There was a strange tension in her daughter's voice. "I didn't know you were coming by. I wanted to surprise you with lunch, baby. I made your favorite." Patricia had looked at the Tupperware container in Aaliyah's hands with an expression that could only be described as polite distaste. "How thoughtful." "Patricia, this is Aaliyah," Jasmine had said, and the pause, that horrible telling pause, had cut deeper than any knife. "Not this is my mother, just this is Aaliyah." "Yes, we've met," Patricia had said coolly. "At dinner, remember?" "Of course." Aaliyah had forced a smile, feeling suddenly conscious of her worn jeans and Soul and Spice t-shirt, the flower stain she'd missed on her sleeve, the way her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of styled like these women's. "I just wanted to drop this off and say hi." "That's sweet," Jasmine had said, taking the container but not meeting her mother's eyes. "Thanks, Mom. I'll text you later, okay?" It was a dismissal, clear and unmistakable. Aaliyah had driven home in silence, tears she refused to shed burning behind her eyes. When she'd gotten home, she'd found Malik in the kitchen of their restaurant prepping for the dinner service. "How's our girl?" he'd asked, looking up with that smile that had sustained her through 4 decades. Aaliyah had opened her mouth to tell him to share the hurt that was spreading through her chest like poison. But then she'd seen the hope in his eyes, the pride he still carried for their daughter, and she couldn't do it. "She's fine," Aaliyah had lied. "She's perfect." That evening, alone in their bedroom, Aaliyah had allowed herself to remember. Jasmine at 10 crying because the other kids at school had made fun of the fact that she smelled like fried chicken from helping at the restaurant after school. Jasmine at 16 begging to work anywhere but Soul and Spice, not wanting her classmates to see her there. Jasmine at 20 home from college for Thanksgiving, bringing a friend and introducing Aaliyah and Malik as the people who own this place instead of my parents. The signs had always been there. Aaliyah had just chosen not to see them. She'd told herself it was normal teenage embarrassment. She'd convinced herself that Jasmine would grow out of it, that she'd eventually understand the value of what her parents had built, the sacrifice it represented. But now, watching her daughter prepare for a wedding where she seemed to want her parents to be invisible, Aaliyah couldn't lie to herself anymore. Her daughter was ashamed of her. Ashamed of them. Ashamed of where she'd come from. And the worst part, Aaliyah understood. God help her, she understood. Because hadn't she wanted better for Jasmine, precisely so she wouldn't have to live this life? Hadn't she pushed her daughter toward education and opportunity specifically so she could escape the limited world of Soul and Spice? Be careful what you wish for, her mother's voice whispered in her memory. You might just get it. What Aaliyah didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that 2 weeks before the wedding, another conversation was taking place in Patricia Whitmore's penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. "Tell me again," Patricia said, swirling her wine glass, "about your family's assets." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably on the white leather sofa. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights sparkled like diamonds. "I don't understand what you mean." "The estate, Thornfield Manor. You mentioned your family has a business relationship with the owners." "Yes, they're old friends." "Old friends who own a multi-million-dollar estate." Patricia's smile was sharp. "And the business your parents run. You said they own property on the south side." Jasmine's mouth went dry. She'd said too much, and not enough had painted a picture that was true in the smallest technical sense, but false in every way that mattered. "They've been very successful," she heard herself say the lie, tasting like ash in her mouth. "Of course." Patricia set down her wine glass. "Trevor deserves a wife from a good family, a stable family. I'm glad to see you come from such substantial stock." After Jasmine left, Patricia picked up her phone and made a call to a private investigator she'd used before. "I need you to look into someone, Aaliyah and Malik Hayes, south side of Chicago. I want to know everything about their financial situation, their business holdings, everything." Because Patricia Whitmore had her own secrets, her own debts, and she'd learned long ago that the best way to solve financial problems was to marry into money. If Trevor was going to marry this girl, Patricia needed to know exactly what assets the Hayes family had to offer. Meanwhile, in their small house, Aaliyah sat at the kitchen table with Malik counting out the money they'd saved for Jasmine's wedding, $120,000 for the venue and services. It was everything they had. But there was more. In a small envelope tucked in Aaliyah's purse, there was another $50,000 in cash. Money they'd saved over the years, hidden away for emergencies. Money they'd planned to use for retirement, for medical bills, for the 1,000 small disasters that could derail a life built on such a narrow margin. "This is for Jasmine," Aaliyah said quietly, holding up the envelope. "For her new life. So she and Trevor have something to start with." Malik covered his wife's hand with his own. "Are you sure, honey, that's everything we have left?" "I'm sure." Aaliyah's voice was firm even as her heart ached. "She deserves a good start. Better than what we had." She wrote out a card to go with the money. "To our beloved Jasmine, may your new life be filled with happiness. Love always, Mom and Dad." Neither of them knew that in 3 days their daughter would ban them from her wedding. Neither of them knew that in 3 days their entire world would shatter. Neither of them knew that this money, this final gift of love, would become the weapon that would tear their family apart. The evening sun cast long shadows through the kitchen window as Aaliyah sealed the envelope. In her heart, she whispered a prayer that had sustained her through 40 years of struggle. "Please, God, let her be happy. Let everything we've sacrificed be worth it." But some prayers, Aaliyah would learn, are answered in ways we never expect. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, one of those perfect June days that Chicago saves for special occasions. Aaliyah woke at 5 a.m. as she had every morning for 40 years, her body trained to rise with the sun no matter what the day held. But this morning was different. This morning she wouldn't be heading to Soul and Spice to prep vegetables and start the coffee. This morning she would watch her only daughter get married. She and Malik dressed carefully, reverently. The powder blue dress fit perfectly, the silk cool against her skin. Malik's suit made him look distinguished, handsome, in a way that made her heart flutter, even after all these years. They stood together in front of their bedroom mirror, two people who had built a life from nothing, who had loved and struggled and sacrificed until sacrifice became as natural as breathing. "We did good, didn't we?" Malik asked softly, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. "We did everything we could," Aaliyah replied, but there was something in her voice, some shadow of doubt she couldn't quite shake. They loaded the car with gifts, the envelope containing 50,000 6 bottles of expensive champagne they'd saved for this day, and a photo album Aaliyah had spent months preparing, filled with pictures of Jasmine from birth to graduation, each one captioned with love notes and memories. The drive to Thornfield Manor took 45 minutes. They didn't talk much, both lost in their own thoughts, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to the rolling countryside where wealth sat like a crown on every manicured acre. "Do you think she's nervous?" Malik asked as they turned onto the long driveway leading to the estate. "Every bride is nervous," Aaliyah said. "I was terrified when I married you." "You terrified you were the bravest woman I'd ever met." "Brave because I was scared, honey. There's no courage without fear. They pulled up to the front gate at 11 a.m. 2 hours before the ceremony. The estate looked like something from a fairy tale, white tents billowing on the lawn, flowers everywhere, staff members rushing about with last-minute preparations. Aaliyah took a deep breath, clutching the gift bag to her chest. Okay, let's go see our daughter get married. But when they approached the main entrance, a young man in a black suit stepped forward, clipboard in hand. Good morning. Names, please. Aaliyah and Malik Hayes, Malik said warmly. We're the bride's parents. The young man, barely 25 with sharp eyes and an earpiece, scanned his list. Once, twice, a third time, his finger trailing down the page. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see your names on the guest list. Aaliyah laughed, certain there had been a mistake. Honey, we're not guests. We're her parents, Aaliyah and Malik Hayes. We're paying for this whole thing. The young man's expression didn't change. I understand, ma'am, but I have specific instructions. Your names are not on the approved entry list. There must be some kind of error, Malik said, his voice still patient, still kind, still believing in the fundamental goodness of the world. Can you check with someone? Maybe call the bride? The security guard spoke into his radio, and Aaliyah felt the first cold finger of dread trail down her spine. This was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. A woman in a headset appeared, looking flustered. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I'm Caroline, the wedding coordinator. I'm afraid there's been a situation. What kind of situation? Aaliyah asked, her voice hardening. The bride has specifically requested that you not be admitted to the venue at this time. The words landed like physical blows. Aaliyah actually stumbled backward, and Malik's hand shot out to steady her. That's impossible, Aaliyah whispered. This is our daughter's wedding. We're paying for it. I understand this is difficult, Caroline said, her practiced sympathy making everything worse. But I have my instructions directly from Miss Jasmine. I'm very sorry. No, Aaliyah found her strength. No, you're going to take me to my daughter right now. There's been a mistake. Ma'am, I can't now. The word cracked like a whip. Something in Aaliyah's face must have convinced the coordinator, because she nodded reluctantly. Follow me. But please, the bride is getting ready. You need to be quick. They walked through the manor's marble halls, past staff members setting up champagne towers and adjusting floral arrangements. Each step felt surreal, like walking through a dream that was rapidly becoming a nightmare. Caroline knocked on an ornate door marked Bridal Suite. Jasmine, there are some people here to see you. The door opened, and there she was, their daughter, their beautiful girl, standing in a wedding dress that must have cost $10,000, her hair swept up in an elegant style, her makeup perfect. She looked like a princess. She looked like a stranger. Behind her, Patricia Whitmore sat on a velvet settee, looking like the cat who'd caught the canary. Jasmine, Aaliyah breathed. Baby, what's going on? They said we're not allowed in. Jasmine's face crumpled for just a second, a flash of the little girl she'd been, the daughter who'd run to her mother for comfort. But then she looked at Patricia, and something in her expression hardened. Mom, Dad, you shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be. Aaliyah couldn't finish the sentence. This is your wedding day. Of course we should be here. I told the coordinator to call you this morning. Jasmine wouldn't meet her mother's eyes. I left a message explaining. We never got a message. Jasmine, what is happening? Jasmine took a shaky breath. I need you to go home. Please, just go home. Go home. Malik's voice cracked. Baby girl, we don't understand. Trevor's family doesn't know about. Jasmine gestured vaguely, helplessly. About the restaurant. About where I really come from. They think, I told them we own properties. That you're. The truth crashed over Aaliyah like ice water. You told them we're rich. I didn't lie, Jasmine said desperately. I just didn't correct their assumptions. And now if they see. She gestured at her parents' clothes, nice but not designer, expensive for them, but cheap by these standards. If they see that we're just regular working people, Aaliyah finished quietly. If they see the truth. Patricia stood up, smoothing her designer dress. Perhaps it would be best if you did leave. Today is about Jasmine and Trevor, not about making everyone uncomfortable. Aaliyah turned to the older woman, seeing clearly for the first time what she should have seen months ago. You knew all along that Jasmine was lying. I knew what I needed to know, Patricia said coolly. That your daughter is an opportunist willing to do whatever it takes to climb the social ladder. Rather like myself at her age, actually. Get out, Jasmine said suddenly, her voice breaking. Please, Mom, Dad, just go. You're making this harder. Making this harder? Aaliyah felt something crack inside her chest, something that had held firm through 40 years of struggle and sacrifice. We gave you everything. Everything we had. Everything we were. And you're asking us to leave. I'm sorry. Jasmine was crying now, mascara streaking down her perfect makeup. I'm so sorry, but I can't have you here. Trevor's family will know. They'll see. And then everything will be ruined. Malik stepped forward, reaching for his daughter. Baby, if Trevor really loves you. Please, Dad. Jasmine backed away from her father's outstretched hand. Please, just go. They stood in the parking lot, the elegant estate looming behind them like a monument to everything they'd never been, never had, never would be. Aaliyah's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. We should go, Malik said softly. Honey, we should just go home. But Aaliyah didn't move. She stood there staring at the manor, at the white tents and the flowers and the perfection of it all. 40 years. 40 years of 16-hour days. 40 years of sacrifice. 40 years of loving a daughter who was now too ashamed to let them watch her get married. No, she said quietly. Aaliyah. No. Louder now, stronger. I did not spend 40 years building a life so my daughter could treat me like trash. I did not sacrifice everything so she could pretend we don't exist. What are you going to do? Aaliyah pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady now, purpose replacing shock. I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for. The first call was to David Morrison, the catering manager. David had worked at Soul & Spice as a teenager, had learned to cook in their kitchen, had built his career on the foundation they'd given him. Mrs. Hayes. His voice was warm, happy. I'm at Thornfield right now. Everything's perfect. The food is going to be amazing. David, baby, I need you to listen carefully. What's wrong? Do you remember what I did for you when you had nowhere else to go? Of course. You gave me a job when everyone else said I was too much trouble. You believed in me. Then I need you to believe in me now. I need you to stop service. There was a long pause. Mrs. Hayes, the wedding. The wedding is paid for by me. Every cent. But my daughter has informed me that I'm not welcome. That I'm an embarrassment. So I'm exercising my rights under the service contract. If you stop service, the wedding falls apart. I know. Aaliyah's voice was hard cold. Do it, David. All those years ago you told me you owed me a debt. I'm calling it in. Another pause, then, yes, ma'am. The moment I tell you to. The second call was harder. Rachel Thompson, her old friend, the owner of Thornfield Manor. Aaliyah, I was wondering when you'd arrive. I can't wait to catch up after the ceremony. Rachel, I need to see the rental contract. What, why? Please, it's important. 20 minutes later, Aaliyah sat in Rachel's office reading through the paperwork she'd signed 3 months ago. And there it was in Section 12, subsection C. In the event that the primary renter is denied access to the venue during the contracted event, this contract shall be considered null and void, and all parties must vacate the premises within 2 hours of notification. Aaliyah, what's going on? Rachel asked, concern etched on her face. Aaliyah told her everything. The lies, the shame, the rejection at the door of her own daughter's wedding. Rachel's face grew dark with anger. That little "don't," Aaliyah interrupted. She's still my daughter, but Rachel, I need your help. Anything. I want to invoke Section 12. Rachel's eyes widened. If you do that, the wedding is over. Everyone will have to leave. I know. Aaliyah, are you sure this is nuclear? Aaliyah thought of Jasmine backing away from her father's outstretched hand. She thought of 40 years of sacrifice being repaid with shame. She thought of that little girl who used to help in the restaurant, who'd fallen asleep on her shoulder during long drives home, who'd once told her, Mama, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I'm sure, she said, but not yet. Let the ceremony begin. Let her think she's won. And then we end this. At 2:00 p.m., exactly on schedule, Jasmine Hayes began walking down the aisle of Thornfield Manor's garden pavilion. She walked alone. No father to give her away. She'd told the guests her parents were delayed, caught in traffic, would arrive any moment. The lies came so easily now. Trevor stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo, smiling at his bride. He didn't know. Dear God, he really didn't know what kind of woman he was marrying. Patricia sat in the front row, triumphant. She'd won. She'd successfully orchestrated a wedding that would connect her failing family to what she believed was wealth and property. Soon she thought all their financial problems would be solved. The ceremony proceeded. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged. And through it all, Aaliyah watched from the parking lot on her phone, streaming the wedding through one of the staff members' devices, a young woman who'd quietly agreed to help after learning what Jasmine had done. "Now," Aaliyah said into her phone when the minister pronounced them husband and wife. "David now." The reception began at 2:45 p.m. Guests filed into the grand ballroom, admiring the elaborate flower arrangements, the crystal chandeliers, the perfection of it all. At 3:30 p.m., the champagne service stopped. "Excuse me," Patricia called to a passing waiter. "We need more champagne." "I'm sorry, ma'am. Service has been suspended pending payment." "But that's ridiculous. Everything's been paid for." The catering manager appeared, David in his chef's whites, his face professionally neutral. "I'm afraid there's been a situation with the account. All services are now cash only." Trevor rushed over. "What do you mean cash only? My mother-in-law paid for everything." "Yes, sir. Mrs. Aaliyah Hayes, who is not present at this wedding in violation of her contract terms. Therefore, all prepaid services have been suspended." Patricia's face went white. You can't do that." "I can, and I am, ma'am. If you'd like to continue service, you'll need to provide payment immediately. The remaining balance is $85,000. The number hung in the air like a bomb. Trevor turned to Jasmine, who stood frozen in her wedding dress. "Your mother paid $85,000, I thought. You said, I can explain. You said your family had money. You said they owned properties. You said, I never actually said that." Jasmine's voice was rising, panicked. "You all assumed, because you let us." Trevor's voice cracked. "Because you lied." Patricia grabbed Jasmine's arm. "Where are your parents? Call them. Tell them to fix this." "I can't," Jasmine whispered. "I told them they couldn't come." "You what?" And then, like an avenging angel, Aaliyah walked into the ballroom. She moved with a dignity that made everyone stop and stare. Malik followed a step behind his hand on his wife's back, supporting her as he'd done for 40 years. "I'm Aaliyah Hayes," she announced, her voice carrying through the now silent room. "Mother of the bride, the woman who paid for every single thing you see here, the woman who was banned from her own daughter's wedding because she wasn't good enough, because she's just a cook, just a working-class woman who spent 40 years sacrificing everything for a daughter who's ashamed of her." Jasmine moved toward her mother. "Mom, please, don't." Aaliyah held up a hand. "I came here to tell you something, baby girl. I came here to give you this." She held up the envelope containing $58,000. "This was supposed to be your wedding gift. Every penny we had left. Your father and I were going to give you everything one last time." "Mrs. Hayes," Trevor said, stepping forward. "I didn't know. Jasmine told me." "Jasmine told you lies, but she learned that from someone, didn't she?" Aaliyah turned to Patricia. You knew she was lying, didn't you?" Patricia's face was a mask. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really, because I made some phone calls this morning, called some people I know at the banks. Turns out the Whitmore family is bankrupt. Turns out you're about to lose your penthouse. Turns out you've been looking for a wealthy family to marry into to save yourself." The room erupted in whispers. "That's not," Patricia started. But a man stood up from the back of the room, Henry Blackwood, looking grave. "Patricia, you owe my bank $200,000. You told me you'd have it after the wedding, after your son married into a wealthy family." Trevor looked at his mother in horror. "Mom, you were supposed to fix this," Patricia hissed at Jasmine. "You were supposed to have money." "My family does have money," Jasmine cried. "They have this." She gestured at the envelope in her mother's hands. "They have savings. $50,000. Patricia laughed bitterly. "I thought they were millionaires. I thought they owned real estate." "They do. They own the building where their restaurant is." The truth came out in ugly waves. Patricia had investigated the Hayes family, had believed Jasmine's careful misdirection about property ownership and business connections. She'd thought she was marrying Trevor to an heiress. Jasmine had thought she was marrying into old money. Both had been lying. Both had been lies. Rachel Thompson appeared, flanked by 2 police officers and a lawyer. "I'm sorry, everyone, but this event must conclude immediately. The venue contract has been voided. You have 1 hour to clear the premises." "You can't do this," Patricia shrieked. "I can, and I am. Mrs. Hayes was denied entry to her daughter's wedding, which violates the rental agreement. This wedding is over." Chaos erupted. Guests began gathering their things, confused and scandalized. Trevor stood like a statue staring at Jasmine as if seeing her for the first time. "You lied to me," he said quietly. "About everything. I loved you. You loved what I represented. You loved the idea of escaping your past. But you know what, Jasmine? Your past is the best thing about you. Your parents." He gestured at Aaliyah and Malik. "They're heroes. They built something from nothing. They sacrificed everything for you, and you treated them like trash." Jasmine sank to the floor, her $10,000 dress pooling around her, and finally, she understood what she'd done. Aaliyah stood over her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Jasmine. I will always love you. But I can't stay and watch you destroy yourself trying to be someone you're not. When you're ready to remember who you really are, where you really come from, and be proud of it, then maybe we can talk." She turned to Malik. "Let's go home, honey." As they walked out of Thornfield Manor, Aaliyah could hear her daughter crying behind her. It was the sound of a heart breaking. But Aaliyah's heart had been breaking for months, years, maybe watching her daughter drift further and further away from the truth of who she was. Sometimes love meant walking away. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent could give was the space for a child to fall and learn to stand up again on their own. Behind them, a $120,000 wedding lay in ruins. But in Aaliyah's purse, there was still an envelope with $50,000. And in her heart, there was still a door open waiting for the day when her daughter would be brave enough to walk through it. 2 weeks passed in silence. Aaliyah and Malik returned to their small house, to their quiet life. The phone rang constantly, Jasmine's number flashing on the screen, but Aaliyah never answered. She'd read the text messages, though. Hundreds of them. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Please talk to me. I don't know what I was thinking. I've lost everything." But Aaliyah wasn't ready. The wound was too fresh, too deep. "Do you think we were too harsh?" Malik asked one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over their neighborhood. Aaliyah was quiet for a long moment. "No, I think we finally respected ourselves enough to say this far, no further." She opened her phone, scrolling through photos she'd taken over the years. Jasmine at 5, gap-toothed and grinning. Jasmine at 12, rolling her eyes but still hugging her mother. Jasmine at 22, accepting her diploma, mouthing "thank you" to her parents in the crowd. When had it all gone wrong? But Aaliyah knew. She'd seen it happening for years, the gradual pulling away, the shame creeping in like poison. Jasmine hadn't woken up one day and decided to hate her parents. It had been a slow erosion influenced by 1,000 small moments, 1,000 voices telling her she wasn't good enough because of where she came from. "Society did this to her," Aaliyah said softly, "made her feel like she had to be ashamed." "But she chose to believe it," Malik replied. "That's the part that hurts." 1 month after the ruined wedding, Jasmine appeared at their door. She looked different. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back, her face bare, and somehow more beautiful for it. "Please," she said when Aaliyah opened the door. "Please let me talk to you." Aaliyah wanted to slam the door. She wanted to protect her heart from another blow. But Malik appeared behind her, and his gentle hand on her shoulder reminded her this was still their daughter. They sat in the living room, the same furniture Jasmine used to jump on as a child, the same coffee table where she'd done her homework, the same home she'd been so desperate to escape. "I lost everything," Jasmine began, her voice shaking. "Trevor left me. The job let me go. Apparently Patricia had been spreading rumors that I was a con artist. My friends. Everyone just disappeared. And you think we're your backup plan?" Aaliyah's voice was hard. "No." Jasmine looked up, tears streaming. "That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I finally understand." She pulled out her phone, showing them screenshots. Messages from her former boss. "Remember, our clients are high society. Be mindful of your background." Messages from her friends. "Your wedding better not be at your parents' restaurant, LOL." Messages from Patricia. "Trevor deserves a wife from a proper family, I'm sure you understand." "I've been drowning in these messages for years," Jasmine whispered. "Everyone telling me I wasn't good enough, that you weren't good enough, and I was too weak to fight back. So I pretended. I lied. I convinced myself that if I could just be someone else, someone better, then I'd finally be worthy." Twist number 3 revealed. "But the truth is, Mom, Dad, I wasn't ashamed of you. I was ashamed of myself. Ashamed that I couldn't be strong enough to say these are my parents and I'm proud of them. Ashamed that I cared more about what strangers thought than what you felt." Aaliyah felt something crack in her chest, the ice beginning to thaw. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Jasmine continued. "I just needed you to know you didn't fail me. I failed myself, and I failed you." The healing didn't happen overnight. Jasmine started coming to the house every week, not asking to be let in, just sitting on the porch steps like she used to as a teenager. Sometimes Aaliyah would watch her from the window. Sometimes she'd bring out a glass of lemonade and leave it on the railing without a word. 2 months after the wedding, Aaliyah had a heart attack. Not a severe one, the doctors said, but a warning. Stress age, a lifetime of hard work taking its toll. When Jasmine got the call, she ran to the hospital still wearing her work uniform from the diner where she'd taken a job, not ashamed anymore to work in food service, understanding now what her parents had always known, honest work was nothing to hide. Climax number 2, she found Malik in the waiting room, his face in his hands, and she wrapped her arms around her father for the first time in years. "Dad, I'm here. I'm here." When they led her into the hospital room, Aaliyah looked so small in that bed, tubes and monitors beeping softly. "Mom," Jasmine whispered, taking her mother's hand. "I'm so sorry. For everything. I love you. I'm proud of you. And if you give me another chance, I promise." "Hush, baby." Aaliyah's voice was weak but warm. "I never stopped loving you. I was just waiting for you to love yourself." They cried together, mother and daughter, 40 years of love and pain and misunderstanding finally breaking open into truth. 6 months later, Aaliyah stood at the train station with Malik, 2 tickets in hand for a cross-country journey they'd dreamed about for decades. They'd sold Soul and Spice to David, who was running it beautifully. They'd given the $50,000 to a culinary school scholarship fund in Jasmine's name. And now, finally, they were going to live for themselves. Jasmine came to see them off, Trevor beside her. They'd reconciled slowly, carefully building something real this time, based on truth instead of lies. "You're really doing it," Jasmine said, hugging her mother tight. 40 years, baby. We earned this. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Both of you." And this time Jasmine meant it with her whole heart. As the train pulled away, Aaliyah watched her daughter standing on the platform, waving, tears streaming down her face. But they were good tears, healing tears. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Malik asked. Aaliyah smiled, squeezing her husband's hand. "She'll be better than okay. She knows who she is now. That's more than most people ever find." The train picked up speed, carrying them toward new horizons, new adventures, the life they'd postponed for 40 years while they built a foundation for their daughter. They'd done their job. They'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her. And they'd taught her the hardest lesson of all, that love without self-respect is not love at all. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is the freedom to fall and the courage to rise again. And sometimes the greatest love story isn't about staying together at all costs. Sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away and trust that the seeds you planted will eventually grow. 1 year later, Aaliyah received a package. Inside was a photo Jasmine in chef's whites, standing in front of a small community kitchen. The sign read, "Second Chances Catering, serving good food and better futures." The note said, "Thank you for teaching me that honest work done with love is the most beautiful thing in the world. I'm finally proud of where I come from, because I finally understand where I'm going. Love always, your daughter." Aaliyah tucked the photo into her travel journal right next to a picture of her and Malik standing in front of the Grand Canyon, gray-haired and grinning free at last. Some stories don't end with everyone together. Some stories end with everyone finally beautifully themselves.